So I want to talk a little bit of how we graze this year. So right now, this paddock, we just got into our stockpile. So we didn't graze this, we just let it grow out the whole year. So the idea is that in the spring, whenever you're grazing, instead of trying to keep perfectly up with all of your grass and keep it all vegetative and go move really fast, we graze and keep the grass vegetative. But if you're stocking correctly in the spring, your grass is going to grow faster than the animals can eat. So when that happens, instead of trying to chase around the farm and keep everything vegetative, you let some stuff go, and then you just keep some of your farm vegetative. So we were able to stockpile about 25% of our pasture where we didn't graze it at all. And then if you have a drought, instead of just in the summertime when you have a drought and your grass is growing really slow, your animals might be eating grass faster than it's growing, you can jump into your stockpile and eat some stockpile. And then of course when winter comes, you can use up your stockpile. So the good thing about that is you stay vegetative, and your animals are eating vegetative and not rank grass most of the year. So most of the time they're eating vegetative grass, and then you're only eating the rank grass one time, when you're eating up your stockpile. So instead of being kind of like on the edge of kind of not good grass all the time, they're vegetative and then they're rank. Vegetative and then sometimes it's rank. And then also if your grass is mixed together, like in this stockpile, we have a lot of different stuff. And also the fall fescue is coming in, so it's green. So this stockpile is really not that bad. So they're gonna eat, this is all the summer grass. This is called purple top, which we're real excited to have some summer grasses that aren't broom sage. So that's coming in, so we really like that. And that's of course, it all frost killed, and it's gonna be real, not real nutritive, but there's gonna be a lot of carbon in there. If you mix that with the green coming up from the fall, you have your green fescue coming up and maybe a little bit of clover underneath here, this really isn't a bad ration. Like, you're not gonna wanna, they're not gonna gain a lot of weight on it, but it's really good, and it's a lot of forage. So if you can save your stockpile and eat your stockpile whenever the fall cool seasons come through, it's really not a bad ration. And then the idea is, so the grass that has been grazed quite often, so the grass we kept vegetative, it might have gotten 3 grazings, maybe 4. Number one, by doing that, I grew more grass. I grew more grass where I grazed a lot, because I'm keeping it vegetative, so it's always growing. This growth is going to slow down a little bit, so if I would have grazed this twice this year, I would have gotten more total forage, and I've gotten higher quality forage. But on the grass that I grazed, like 75% of my farm, I kept it really vegetative, and I grew probably a lot of grass. And then here, I grew a decent amount of grass, but not as much as I could have. But all this grass, as it's, number one, I have stockpile, so if I ever get in a bad position, I have the extra grass. But number two, this grass got really mature, and it spent a lot of time probably growing out its roots, because it expressed itself on the leaves, and now it can start growing its roots. And then also root exudates, which is like, once the plant's happy, it took care of its leaves, it took care of seeding itself, took care of its roots, it's going to start pumping out root exudates. Those exudates are going to feed your microbes, and the reason why they're sending those root exudates down is because they have the extra energy, so they want to feed the bacteria and fungi that they're in a symbiotic relationship with. So they're going to give them food, sugars, and in return they're going to get more complex minerals, which a plant's never going to do that if it's fighting for its life, if it's trying to grow leaves, if it needs photosynthesis, trying to seed, trying to reproduce. It's never going to get to the point where it's like really feeding that. That's kind of extra. So you really need a healthy plant and a plant that's really kind of mature before you get those root exudates. And that helps, number one, it helps get minerals out of the soil that maybe weren't released, but also those bacteria and fungi they're just living for maybe 24 hours, 48 hours. So they're just cycling. They're living and they're dying, and they're living and they're dying, and they're creating all that biomass underneath the ground. So not just like the carbon that's on top from leaf litter, deep into the ground where the roots are, you have all these dead microbes and all this carbon building up from the carbon going from the roots into the ground, feeding all that life, and it becomes tons and tons over a course of a year. Could be tons and tons of carbon. That carbon is going to make that's whenever you see black soil and it's fertile, that black is carbon. It's not necessarily potassium or calcium or some mineral. It's carbon. And the reason why people equate that with really good soil is because the soil becomes less compacted. It holds more water. It's easier for roots to grow into. So all that organic matter that turns into long-term organic black matter in the soil is creating a structure, not necessarily like nutrients, but it's creating a structure where you hold water and hold nutrients. So this sandy, really poor sandy soil, I think it's like 1.5% organic matter. If we did this over the course of time and that got up to 5 and 6 and 7% organic matter, then you can grow so much more forage by doing that. So the stockpiling is for both kind of emergencies, and it's also, a way to keep the rest of your farm vegetative. It also should, in the long term, make your soil better. So we're going to try to keep going back and forth. And so next year, this will get grazed 3 and 4 times, and it'll stay vegetative. And it's not going to hurt anything. It's going to grow a lot of leaves doing that, but probably not as much organic matter. But that's okay. We're going to feed the animals, and then there'll be another part of the farm that's more like this stockpile standing hay, and that'll be kind of better for the soil, and feed less hay. So that's what we're trying to do, and that's what we did this year, and really glad with how it worked out. All right, so we're in a field where we grazed this all year long. So it stayed, the quality of the grass stayed really good. We grazed it low, then we let it grow back, and right before it started to maybe get in boot stage or whatever, we came and grazed it again. So in this instance, by doing that, you get a lot of forage because you're grazing it and you get that regrowth, and you're also getting rid of a lot of the stems and a lot of the weeds and everything, so you end up with a lot more leafy vegetation. So you're not growing a lot of seeds and stems and weeds and things like that. You end up with a lot of leaves, and you open up the canopy, so you get a lot more seedlings. So you're going to end up, instead of having, in a place where you graze once a year, you'll end up with some big clumps like this, big clump, but then you'll have gaps where there's no seedlings. In this scenario, when you graze like this, you're going to end up with more leafy vegetation, not a lot of gaps and holes in your soil. So that was good for this. However, if I did this every year for 10 years and never let that grass fully express itself, then I think over time the roots would stay the same or not really get any better, and probably there wouldn't be a whole lot of root exudates, because it just wouldn't get to that point where it's ready to start pumping a lot of carbon into the ground, because it's trying to take care of itself and it's worried about making enough leaves for photosynthesis. So this is good for a lot of forage. It's really good for the sheep because they eat a lot of high quality grass, but it's probably not so great for the plants. It's probably just kind of in a neutral for the plants. However, every 3rd or 4th year, you let this fully express itself, get rank, stockpile. Then in those years, it's gonna, it's been grazed, everything's kind of leafy, and then you let it fully express itself. Then you'll get a good amount of forage, but you'll probably get to that point where that plant can work on its roots. That plant can do more root exudates and things like that. And so as we rotate around the farm, we'll choose a different pasture to let grow fully and express itself, and a different pasture where we're going to graze it several times and keep it vegetative. And we'll just continue to kind of observe our pastures, and then decide what we want to stockpile and what we don't. And then also, like, the time of year that you graze it, because you're not grazing every pasture at the same time. Sometimes a pasture you may graze a little bit earlier than you want to, and in that case you may hurt your cool seasons a little bit more because you graze in early April, right when it was trying to come up, and so that may favor some of your summer grasses because you clean the canopy for April 15th, and so the summer grasses came up, and then you left the summer grasses alone all through until the end of June, so you got a lot of summer growth. Then the next year you come through, maybe you don't graze it, its first graze doesn't happen until the end of April, and those cool seasons just really explode and get tons of growth, and you favor your cool season. So you not only choose which pastures you're going to stockpile, which pastures you're going to try to graze and keep vegetative, but also you hit them at different times, and you're kind of favoring different plants. Maybe there's a weed that you really are struggling with, and you want to come in and just give it a really hard, severe graze right when that weed that you feel like there's too much of is in its vegetative and just about to express itself and just about to take off. You come through and hammer it, and then you leave that pasture alone for 100 days. Well, every other grass that's maybe a little bit later in succession is going to come through and crowd out that weed. So you're always kind of thinking about your pasture and what do I want to do? What's my goal for this pasture this year? And you're just using your animals as a tool to kind of get you where you want to go.